I remember the exact moment my marriage ended. It wasn't when I caught Brad texting another woman at 2 a.m. It wasn't during those late meetings that left traces of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. It wasn't even the growing silences between us, expanding like invisible cracks in fine china. No, it was a Tuesday evening in April, the golden hour casting our Westchester kitchen in deceptive warmth. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, still wearing my court attire, pencil skirt and silk blouse, my attorney uniform. The front door slammed with unnecessary force. Brad's footsteps, deliberate and heavy, crossed our foyer's marble tiles. "Harper." My name sounded foreign in his mouth, not the soft whisper from our wedding day, but sharp, impatient. I looked up to find my husband of 8 years standing across the kitchen island, his expression unreadable. His blonde hair was freshly trimmed, his blue button-down crisp and unwrinkled. He placed a manila folder between us like it might detonate. "What's this?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Divorce papers." His voice was mechanical, rehearsed. "I need you to sign them." The knife clattered against the cutting board. "What?" The word felt inadequate, absurd. "I've met someone. Her name is Madison." Brad's chin lifted slightly, pride mixing with defiance. "She's moving in this weekend." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "This weekend? Brad, what are you talking about?" "I'm giving you 48 hours to pack your things and leave." He pushed the folder closer to me. "My attorney says it's a fair settlement." "Fair?" The word tasted like copper in my mouth. "You want me out of our home in 2 days, and you're calling that fair?" Brad's expression hardened. "This house belongs to me now. Madison will be living here. We don't want this to get messy." "We?" The word caught in my throat. "You're a lawyer, Harper. You should know when you've lost." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Madison owns this place now. Your name's coming off everything." I felt something break inside me, not with a crash, but with a quiet finality, like a thread stretched too far finally snapping. 8 years of marriage, dissolved in under 3 minutes. "You have until Thursday evening," he continued, checking his watch as if my eviction were a business appointment. "I'll be staying at Madison's until then." I stared at the folder, then back at my husband, this stranger with familiar features. "Can I ask you something, Brad?" He sighed, already halfway to the door. "What? How long have you been planning this?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Does it matter?" "It does to me. Madison and I have been together for 6 months." He shrugged, as if admitting to a minor oversight. "She's 25, Harper. She understands me in ways you never could." The revelation should have devastated me. Instead, I felt an odd clarity washing over me. 6 months, while I'd been working overtime to help with house payments, while I'd been attending his company dinners, while I'd been sleeping beside him, trusting him, loving him, he'd been crafting his escape. "I see," I said simply. His eyebrows furrowed at my composure. Perhaps he'd expected tears, screaming, begging. I gave him none. "My attorney will contact yours," he said, reaching for the doorknob. "Don't try to fight this, Harper. You'll just embarrass yourself." After he left, I stood motionless in our kitchen. No, his kitchen now. The vegetables on the cutting board had begun to oxidize, turning slightly brown at the edges. Just like our marriage, I thought grimly. I picked up the folder with trembling hands. Inside, clinical language outlined the dissolution of everything we'd built together. Our joint accounts, our property, our shared dreams, all dissected and divided on cold white paper. Something else fell from the folder. A sticky note with messy handwriting I didn't recognize. "Can't wait to make our house a real home. XOXOM." I slumped against the counter, letting the pages scatter across the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I laughed. A hollow sound that echoed through the empty house. Because there was something Brad didn't know. Something about our beautiful Westchester home with its manicured lawn and custom kitchen. Something about the past 3 years of increasingly desperate financial juggling. Brad believed he was giving Madison a palace. What he didn't realize was that he was handing her a house of cards. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my grandmother Rose's old writing desk in our guest room, the one piece of furniture that was unquestionably mine, and began pulling out files. Rose had been a private investigator before retiring, and she'd taught me one valuable lesson: always keep records. So I had. Every bank statement, every loan document, every piece of correspondence about our finances. I had copies of everything. By dawn, I had constructed a timeline that made my stomach turn. Brad had been playing a dangerous financial game for years, leveraging our home for risky investments, taking out secondary loans without my knowledge, using my inheritance for what he called temporary cash flow solutions. The morning light spilled through the blinds as I stared at the foreclosure warning I'd intercepted 3 weeks earlier. It had arrived while Brad was on a business trip to the Hamptons, a trip I now understood had likely included Madison. I'd been planning to confront him about it, to work together on a solution. Now, I carefully folded the notice and placed it back in its envelope. Let Madison find it. I showered, dressed in my most confident pantsuit, and packed 2 suitcases with only what I absolutely needed. Before leaving, I signed the divorce papers with steady hands. I left them on the kitchen counter, weighted down with my house key. No note, no tearful goodbye, no desperate plea, just my signature and a single. Thought that carried me through the doorway. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't fighting back. It's stepping aside and letting consequences unfold naturally. As I drove away from the house Brad thought was his empire, I felt lighter than I had in years. He had given me 48 hours to disappear. I only needed 24 to start rebuilding. Patricia Peterson's law office smelled like leather and sandalwood. It was nothing like the sterile corporate environment where I worked handling real estate contracts. Her space had character, framed feminist quotes, plants thriving on sunny windowsills, and photographs of her mountain climbing adventures. Let me get this straight, Patricia said, peering at me over tortoiseshell reading glasses. Your husband ambushed you with divorce papers? Gave you 48 hours to move out, and you just signed them and left? I nodded, sipping the strong coffee she'd handed me. I did. Harper. She removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. As your friend and as an attorney, I have to ask, what the hell were you thinking? We could have negotiated, delayed, fought for your share. I know what I'm doing, Patty. Her skeptical expression softened slightly. We'd been friends since law school, and she knew I rarely acted without calculation. Tell me everything, she said, leaning back in her chair. I spent the next hour outlining Brad's financial house of cards, the unpaid construction loans, the second mortgage he'd taken out without my knowledge, the home equity line of credit that was approaching default. How long have you known about this? Patricia asked, her legal pad now filled with notes. I suspected for months, confirmed it 3 weeks ago. I pulled out the foreclosure warning and slid it across her desk. This arrived while Brad was with her. Patricia studied the document. And you didn't confront him? I was going to. Then he served me divorce papers and introduced me to my replacement. In the same breath, this Madison person has no idea what she's walking into? None. I tried to keep the satisfaction from my voice and failed. Patricia's laugh was sudden and appreciative. You magnificent, calculating woman. She tapped the foreclosure notice. So instead of fighting the divorce, you're letting them discover they've inherited a financial disaster. Exactly. But Harper, what about you? You've lost your home, your marriage? I lost those things the moment Brad decided to replace me, I interrupted. But I haven't lost myself. Patricia studied me for a long moment. You've changed. 6 months ago, this would have destroyed you. I considered this. Maybe it would have. But something happened when Brad handed me those papers. It was like waking up from a fog. I've spent years making excuses for him, covering his financial missteps, pretending we were partners when I was really just cleaning up his messes. And now? Now I'm done pretending. Patricia nodded slowly, a smile spreading across her face. So what do you need from me? 2 things. First, I need you to represent me in the divorce, but minimally. Let Brad think I'm broken, defeated. Let him believe he's won. And second, I leaned forward. I need you to help me understand exactly what legal protections I still have. There's something Brad doesn't know about our house. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Which is? When we purchased it, I created an LLC to hold the property, a recommendation from my first client at the firm. Brad signed all the paperwork, but I don't think he ever understood the implications. Understanding dawned on Patricia's face. The house isn't in his name personally. Exactly. I smiled for what felt like the first time in days. It's held by Caldwell Properties LLC. And guess who maintains controlling interest? Patricia's laugh filled the office. Oh, this is going to be interesting. One more thing, I said, my voice growing serious. I don't want revenge, Patty. I just want justice. What's the difference? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. Revenge would be me actively trying to hurt them. Justice is me stepping back and letting reality do its work. Patricia nodded slowly. Where are you staying? I've rented a small apartment in Terrytown. It's temporary. And work? I took 2 weeks of personal leave. I told them I needed time to handle my divorce. Patricia's expression softened. How are you, really? Under all this strategic planning? The question caught me off guard. Since Brad's announcement, I'd been operating on pure adrenaline and calculation. I hadn't allowed myself to feel the full weight of his betrayal. My voice caught unexpectedly. I don't know yet. Some moments I feel liberated. Others, I feel like I'm free-falling. Patricia reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. That's normal. What he did was cruel, Harper. You're allowed to be hurt. I know, but right now being hurt feels like giving him power. And I'm done giving Brad Whitaker anything of mine, especially my tears. As I left Patricia's office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is, Madison. Brad gave me your number. Just wanted to let you know we'll be changing the locks tomorrow. Anything you've left behind will be donated. Attached was a selfie of her in my kitchen, blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, posing with a glass of champagne. My grandmother's antique clock was visible in the background, the one possession I'd genuinely forgotten in my hasty departure. I saved the photo without responding. Evidence, my grandmother would have called it. The clock could stay where it was for now, a silent witness to what was coming. That evening, in my sparse temporary apartment, I opened my laptop and logged into the online banking portal for Caldwell Properties LLC. The account balance was meager, just enough to cover minimal property tax payments. The real money had been drained months ago, siphoned by Brad into what I now suspected were personal accounts. I navigated to the county records website, searching for recent financial activity against our property. The results made me wince. 3 liens, 2 outstanding loans, and a pending foreclosure action. Our perfect Westchester home wasn't just financially underwater, it was in the Mariana Trench. My phone buzzed again. Brad this time. Madison says you didn't respond to her message. Be civil, Harper. This is happening whether you like it or not. I stared at his words, remembering how he'd once written me love notes on origami cranes, hiding them throughout our first apartment for me to find. How had we traveled from there to here? The phone buzzed once more before I could reply. BTW, we're hosting a housewarming this Saturday. Would appreciate if you stayed away from the neighborhood. Don't make this awkward for everyone. I placed the phone face down on the table and looked around my temporary home. Bare walls, rented furniture, empty spaces where a life should be. 48 hours, I whispered to myself, echoing Brad's ultimatum. It had taken him 8 years to destroy our marriage. It would take me far less time to reclaim my dignity. 3 days after signing away my marriage, I found myself sitting in Detective Laura Kim's office at the Westchester County Police Department. The space was utilitarian. Gray walls, metal desk, fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in a slightly sickly pallor. Mrs. Whitaker, Detective Kim began. Ms. Caldwell, I corrected gently. I've resumed. My maiden name. She nodded, making a note on her pad. Ms. Caldwell, I want to be clear about something. What you're describing, taking out loans without your knowledge, forging signatures, these are serious allegations. I understand that. I kept my voice steady. And I want to be equally clear that I'm not here to cause trouble for my ex-husband. I'm here because I believe there may be broader financial improprieties that extend beyond our marriage. This wasn't entirely true. I was absolutely here to cause trouble for Brad, just not in the way Detective Kim might assume. I didn't want him in handcuffs. I wanted him exposed. Detective Kim studied the documents I'd brought. Loan applications with signatures that didn't quite match mine, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, the LLC paperwork Brad had never fully understood. How did you discover all this? She asked. My grandmother was a private investigator. She taught me to keep records. I gestured to the files. And I'm a real estate attorney. I know how property transactions should look. Laura leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. She was younger than me, probably early 30s, with a directness I appreciated. You realize that by filing this report, an investigation will be opened. Your ex-husband could face criminal charges if these allegations prove true. I nodded. I understand. And yet you seem remarkably calm about all this. I smiled thinly. Detective, my husband gave me 48 hours to vacate my home so his 25-year-old girlfriend could move in. I've already experienced the worst he could do to me. Not quite, Laura said quietly. Financial fraud can impact your credit for years. Have you checked your credit report? My stomach dropped. In all my strategic planning, I'd overlooked this obvious step. Laura read my expression perfectly. Let me guess. Joint accounts? Shared credit cards? Yes, I admitted. And my name is on many of the loan documents, even the ones I didn't sign. Then regardless of how this investigation proceeds, you should protect yourself immediately. She slid a business card across the desk. This is a financial crimes specialist. Call her today. As I tucked the card into my purse, Laura fixed me with a penetrating look. There's something you're not telling me, Ms. Caldwell. I met her gaze steadily. There are many things I'm not telling you, Detective, but everything in those files is true. She nodded slowly. I'll need to interview your ex-husband and Ms. Rivers. How do you think they'll respond? I pictured Brad's face, the flash of panic when cornered, followed by the smooth charm he deployed like a shield. And Madison, with her practiced Instagram smile and carefully curated life. They'll deny everything, I said. Brad will say I'm bitter about the divorce. He'll say I'm trying to punish him for finding happiness. And are you? The question hung between us. Was I? The honest answer was more complicated than either yes or no. What I want, I said carefully, is for the truth to be known. Not my version or Brad's version, but the actual truth. Laura gathered the files, nodding. That's what I want too, Ms. Caldwell. As I left the police station, rain began to fall, a gentle spring shower that turned the pavement dark. I opened my umbrella and stood for a moment, watching people hurry past, wondering how many were carrying secrets like mine. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Patricia. I just left Detective Kim, I said by way of greeting. Good. Listen, Harper, we have a situation. I've been reviewing the LLC documents more carefully, and there's something you need to know. I stopped walking. What is it? Brad did more than take out loans against the property. He attempted to transfer ownership of the LLC itself. My grip tightened on the phone. Can he do that? Not legally, no. Not without your signature as the managing member. But it looks like he tried. There's paperwork filed with the Secretary of State's office showing a transfer attempt 3 months ago. Let me guess, my signature is on it? A poor imitation, yes. I've already filed a fraud alert, but this complicates things. I resumed walking, mind racing. How so? If Brad believes he successfully transferred the LLC to himself, he might think he had every right to promise the house to Madison. He might not even realize the foreclosure is happening. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Brad wasn't just betraying me. He was living in a fantasy world of his own creation, one where financial consequences didn't exist. Harper, are you still there? I'm here. I paused at a crosswalk, watching the traffic blur through the rain. What's our next step? I'm meeting with the bank tomorrow. In the meantime, I need you to gather any remaining financial documents you might have. Anything that shows the original LLC structure. I have copies in a safe deposit box, I said. My grandmother's other lesson. Never keep all your evidence in one place. Patricia's laugh came through the phone. I'm starting to think I would have liked your grandmother. You would? Have. She didn't suffer fools either. After ending the call, I ducked into a coffee shop to escape the strengthening rain. As I waited in line, I scrolled through my email, deleting wedding anniversary reminders from restaurants we'd frequented and unsubscribing from couples' vacation promotions. Digital divorce was its own special form of torture. A new email notification appeared, from Madison Rivers. The subject line read simply, Your clock. I opened it, curious despite myself. Harper, I found your grandmother's clock while redecorating. Brad said it has sentimental value to you. I'm not a monster. If you want to pick it up, let me know a time that works. Our home is coming together beautifully, but I don't need bad karma from keeping your family heirloom. Madison attached was a photo of my kitchen, my former kitchen, transformed. The warm yellow walls I'd painted were now stark white. The vintage cookbooks that had lined the open shelving were gone, replaced with color-coordinated jars and minimalist vases. In the corner, my grandmother's clock stood like a lone survivor from a vanished world. I stared at the image, feeling an unexpected pang of loss. It wasn't about the physical space. It was about the memory of painting those yellow walls while Brad and I danced to old records, planning our future in excited whispers. I typed a brief reply. Madison, thank you for reaching out about the clock. It does have sentimental value. I can come by tomorrow around 11 a.m. if that works for you. Harper. Before I could reconsider, I hit send. My coffee arrived and I found a small table by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Tomorrow, I would see firsthand what they had done to my home. Tomorrow, I would face Madison not as an abstract rival, but as a flesh and blood woman. Tomorrow, I would take back my grandmother's clock, and perhaps a piece of myself with it. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous day's rain had washed away all impurities. I dressed carefully for my visit to what Brad now called their home: dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, low heels. Professional, but not trying too hard. The kind of outfit that said I was doing just fine, thank you very much. As I drove through familiar streets, my heart began to pound. Each turn brought memories. The coffee shop where Brad and I had Sunday brunches. The park where we'd, walked after arguments to cool off. The bookstore where he'd proposed on a snowy December evening. I pulled into the driveway of our colonial-style house exactly at 11. Madison's white Tesla sat where my Volvo used to park. Brad's Range Rover was gone. At work, I assumed. Or perhaps deliberately avoiding this meeting. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage. Through the windshield, I studied the house where I'd lived for the past 6 years. New planters flanked the front door. The swing I'd loved had been removed from the porch. Small changes, surgical removals of my existence. The front door opened before I could reach for the bell. Madison stood in the doorway, younger in person than in her Instagram photos, her blonde hair pulled into an artful, messy bun, her yoga-toned body, draped in an oversized sweater and leggings. "Harper," she said, her voice higher than I'd imagined. "Hi." "Madison," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for contacting me about the clock." She stepped back, allowing me inside. "No problem. I can tell it's special." Walking into my former home felt surreal, like visiting a museum exhibit of my previous life. The entryway table where I'd dropped my keys each evening was gone, replaced with a minimalist console I didn't recognize. The family photos had vanished, the walls now adorned with abstract art in muted tones. "I've made some changes," Madison said, following my gaze. "Brad said you wouldn't mind." "It's your home now," I said, the words acid on my tongue. She led me through to the kitchen, chattering nervously about her decorating plans. I half listened, noting the expensive new appliances, the marble countertops that hadn't been there when I left. Brad was spending money we didn't have, digging the financial hole deeper. "Your clock is over here," Madison said, gesturing to the corner where my grandmother's antique mantel clock stood, the only familiar object in a sea of newness. "It's really beautiful." "Vintage?" "It was my grandmother's," I said, moving toward it. "She left it to me when she died." I ran my fingers over the polished wood, remembering Grandma Rose winding it each evening, telling me that keeping time was a form of respect, for others and for oneself. "Brad mentioned your grandmother was important to you," Madison said, watching me. "He said she raised you." I looked up, surprised that Brad had shared this detail. "Yes, after my parents died. I lived with her from age 12. "That must have been hard," Madison said, and for a moment her practiced perfection slipped, revealing something almost like empathy. I wrapped the clock carefully in the soft cloth I'd brought. "Life is full of unexpected turns." Madison fidgeted with her sleeve. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" "No. Thank you. I should get going." "Right, of course." She hesitated. "Harper, I want you to know I never meant to hurt you." I looked at her directly for the first time. She was so young, not just in years, but in experience. Her eyes held the certainty of someone who hadn't yet learned that life rarely follows your carefully filtered plans. "Madison," I said quietly, "you didn't hurt me. Brad did." She blinked rapidly. "He said your marriage was over long before we met, that you were both just going through the motions. I'm sure he believes that." An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I clutched my grandmother's clock, ready to leave, when Madison spoke again. "He's been acting weird lately. Stressed. Is that normal for him?" The question caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I considered warning her, telling her about the foreclosure notice, the financial house of cards, Detective Kim's investigation. But something held me back. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps a deeper understanding that some lessons can only be learned through experience. "Brad handles stress in his own way," I said finally. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." As I turned to leave, Madison called after me. "Harper?" I paused, looking back over my shoulder. "Are you okay? After everything, I mean." The question was so unexpected, so genuine, that it momentarily disarmed me. Was I okay? The truth was complicated. Parts of me were shattered, while others felt strangely liberated. "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. "Day by day." Madison nodded, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfect features. I hope you find someone who makes you happy, like Brad makes me happy. I smiled sadly, hugging my grandmother's clock to my chest. I hope you find happiness too, Madison, whatever form it takes. Driving away from my former home, I felt an unexpected lightness. Meeting Madison had humanized her, removed her from the demon pedestal I'd placed her on in my mind. She wasn't a monster. She was simply young, naive, caught in Brad's web of charm and lies. My phone rang as I pulled onto the highway. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. "How did it go?" she asked when I answered. "Strange," I admitted. "Harder than I expected in some ways, easier in others." "Did you get your clock?" "Yes, but that's not all." I hesitated. Madison mentioned Brad seems stressed. "And the house, Patty, they've been renovating. New appliances, countertops, furniture. It must have cost a fortune they don't have." Patricia was silent for a moment. "The bank meeting this morning was enlightening. The foreclosure is proceeding faster than we thought. They're planning to serve official papers by the end of the week." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Brad doesn't know yet." "No, and there's more. The fraud department is taking your allegations seriously. They've flagged several of the loan applications for investigation." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you need to come to my office. Now. We have preparations to make." As I changed lanes to take the exit toward Patricia's office, my phone buzzed with a text. "Brad, Madison says you came by. Hope you were. Civil. BTW, housewarming party is this Saturday. We're expecting about 50 people, including my parents and some colleagues. Stay away from the neighborhood that day. I mean it, Harper. 50 people. A lavish party in a house built on financial quicksand." I could almost hear the ticking of my grandmother's clock, counting down to the moment when their fantasy world would collapse. I placed the phone on the passenger seat without responding and continued driving, the weight of what was coming settling over me like a heavy cloak. Saturday arrived with picture-perfect weather. Blue skies, gentle breeze, temperature hovering in the mid-70s. The kind of spring day realtors dream about when listing properties. The kind of day that makes people believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. I spent the morning with Patricia, reviewing the latest developments in what she now called Operation Glass House. The foreclosure notice had been processed, scheduled for delivery that afternoon, coincidentally during Brad and Madison's housewarming party. "You don't have to be there," Patricia said, watching me carefully. "In fact, it might be better if you weren't." We were sitting in her backyard, coffee mugs balanced on the arms of Adirondack chairs. Her tortoiseshell cat wove between our legs, demanding attention. "I'm not going to crash their party," I assured her, scratching the cat's ears. "But I need to be nearby. I need to witness it, I suppose?" Patricia nodded, understanding. "Detective Kim called this morning. The Financial Crimes Unit has officially opened an investigation into Brad's activities. They'll be contacting him early next week." "After the party," I noted. "Yes, after his moment in the spotlight." I stared into my coffee cup. "Do you think I'm cruel, Patty? Letting them have this party when I know what's coming?" Patricia considered the question. "I think you're allowing natural consequences to unfold. Brad created this situation, not you." "But Madison is an adult who chose to be with a married man," Patricia finished firmly. "Her choices have consequences, too." I wasn't entirely convinced, but I nodded anyway. The memory of Madison's uncertain eyes haunted me more than I cared to admit. By 3 o'clock, I was parked on Maple Street, 1 block from my former home. From this vantage point, I could see cars beginning to arrive for the party, luxury vehicles lining both sides of the road, elegantly dressed guests bearing housewarming gifts, caterers unloading equipment. I slumped down in my seat, feeling simultaneously vindicated and hollow. This was what Brad wanted, to showcase his perfect new life, his younger girlfriend, his successful escape from our marriage. And he was getting it, at least for the next few hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Kim. "Courier confirmed delivery scheduled for 4:15 p.m. Still want to proceed?" I typed back quickly. "Yes, proceed as planned." Part of me wondered if I was making a mistake, if there was a more private way to handle this revelation. But Brad had chosen to humiliate me publicly, giving me 48 hours to disappear while parading Madison through our socials. Circle. Perhaps there was justice in his humiliation being equally public. At 4:05, I watched the courier van pull onto our street. A young man in a brown uniform emerged, checked his tablet, and approached the house with a large envelope. Through my car window, I could hear faint music and laughter from the backyard where the party was in full swing. The courier rang the doorbell, waited, then rang again. After a minute, the front door opened. Even from my distance, I could see it was Madison, wearing a flowing white dress, her hair arranged in loose waves around her shoulders. She spoke with the courier briefly, signed for the envelope, and closed the door. I exhaled slowly. It was done. The countdown had begun. My phone rang. Patricia again. Did it happen? She asked without preamble. Yes, Madison signed for it. How do you feel? I considered the question. Numb, empty, relieved, all of the above. Do you want me to come get you? No, I said quietly. I need to see this through. Harper, Patricia's voice softened. This won't fix anything. You know that, right? I know, I whispered. But maybe it will end something. 20 minutes passed. The party continued. Music. Drifting through the air, champagne glasses clinking. I was about to give up, to drive away and let the aftermath unfold without me, when it happened. A scream tore through the afternoon air, high, panicked, unmistakably Madison's. It cut through the music, silencing conversations mid-sentence, freezing the perfectly orchestrated celebration in its tracks. I sat up straighter, heart pounding. Through the gaps between houses, I could see guests turning toward the sound, confusion rippling across the backyard. Then Brad appeared, rushing from the back of the house to the front door, his face contorted with concern. He disappeared inside, and the party guests began to murmur among themselves, drinks forgotten in their hands. Minutes stretched like hours. I couldn't see what was happening. Inside the house, could only watch the external signs of internal chaos. Guests began to drift toward their cars, the caterers stood awkwardly by their stations, and the music played on to an increasingly empty audience. Finally, the front door opened again. Brad emerged, his arm around Madison's shoulders. Even from a distance, I could see she was shaking, her perfect white dress now wrinkled, her makeup smeared from tears. Brad's parents followed, his father's face thunderous, his mother's pinched with concern. A heated discussion ensued on the front lawn, gestures growing more animated, voices raising though the words were indistinct from my position. I watched as Brad's father jabbed a finger into his son's chest, as his mother covered her face with her hands, as Madison sank onto the front steps. The foreclosure notice crumpled in her fist. The fantasy was crumbling before my eyes, not with the dignified exit I had imagined in my darker moments, but with messy, painful human reality. My phone rang again. Detective Kim this time. Ms. Caldwell, are you watching? Yes, I said softly. I'm here. I've received a call from Mr. Whitaker. He's demanding to know why a foreclosure notice was delivered to his home. What did you tell him? The truth, that his financial activities are under investigation, and that the foreclosure is proceeding legally based on missed payments and loan defaults. I watched as Brad paced the front lawn, phone pressed to his ear, likely speaking with Detective Kim at that very moment. How did he respond? I asked. He denied everything. Claimed, you were framing him. A pause. He says you're bitter about the divorce and trying to sabotage his new relationship, just as I had predicted. What happens now? I asked. Now we proceed with the investigation. Financial crimes aren't as dramatic as what you see on TV, Ms. Caldwell. They're methodical, documented, deliberate. Like my marriage's collapse, I thought grimly. Thank you. Detective. As I ended the call, I took one last look at the scene unfolding at my former home. The party was definitively over. Guests were leaving in droves, casting backward glances at the drama on the front lawn. The caterers were packing up, likely unpaid. Madison sat alone on the steps, staring at the paper in her hands as if it might transform into something else if she looked hard enough. And Brad. Brad stood in the center of it all, his carefully constructed world disintegrating around him. I started my car and drove away, not in triumph, but in quiet finality. The clock on my dashboard read 5:23 p.m. In the end, Brad had given me 48 hours to leave. It had taken less than 2 hours for his new beginning to end. Sunday morning, I woke to a barrage of missed calls and texts. Friends who'd been at the party, neighbors expressing concern, even Brad's mother, whose message simply read, "We need to talk." I ignored them all, silencing my phone and making coffee in my temporary apartment's tiny kitchen. My grandmother's clock ticked steadily on the counter, its rhythm a reminder that time moves forward regardless of our desires to pause it. By noon, the knocking started, insistent, impossible to ignore. I peered through the peephole to find Madison Rivers standing in my hallway, her usual polished appearance replaced by sweatpants, an oversized hoodie, and red-rimmed eyes. I opened the door cautiously. Madison, you knew. Her voice was raw, accusatory. You knew about the foreclosure, about the loans, about all of it. I stepped back, allowing her. Inside, more out of surprise than hospitality. How did you find me? Brad's secretary. I went through his phone. She paced my small living room like a caged animal. You let me walk into that house thinking it was some kind of prize, when all along it was a time bomb. I didn't owe you warnings, I said quietly. 50 people, Harper. 50 people watched me fall apart when that courier delivered those papers. Brad's parents, his boss, our friends, everyone saw it happen. I'm sorry about the timing, I said, and found that I partly meant it. The courier service chose when to deliver. Madison laughed bitterly. Right. Pure coincidence. She stopped pacing suddenly, turning to face me directly. You know what the worst part is? Not the humiliation, not even losing the house. It's realizing that I never knew him at all. The raw honesty in her voice caught me off guard. I gestured toward the kitchen. Do you want coffee? Madison nodded, collapsing onto my sofa. I busied myself with mugs and cream, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves. How bad is it? I asked, handing her a steaming mug. Financially, I mean. Bad. She wrapped her hands around the mug. The foreclosure is just the beginning. There are credit card debts, personal loans, something about an LLC transfer that failed. Brad's been on the phone with lawyers all night. I sat across from her. And you? Where do you stand in all this? Madison stared into her coffee. I moved out last night. Went to my sister's place. She looked up suddenly. Did you know we'd been together for 6 months? When he asked you for a divorce? That he'd promised me the house before you even knew we existed? I figured it out, I said softly. I believed him, she whispered. I believed everything. That you two were practically separated already. That the house was his to give. That we were building something real. He's very convincing, I offered, remembering how Brad's charm had once worked on me too. Madison set down her mug. I came here to yell at you, to blame you for not warning me. But sitting here now, she shook her head. We're both victims of the same man, aren't we? The question hung between us, unexpectedly binding us in a strange solidarity. Different circumstances, I said. Same betrayal. Did you love him? Madison asked suddenly. At the end, I mean. I considered the question carefully. I loved who I thought he was. I loved the life I thought we were building. The real Brad? The one who could give me 48 hours to vacate my home? No, I didn't love that man. Madison nodded slowly. I should go. She stood, smoothing her sweatpants in a gesture that seemed more habit than necessity. Thank you for the coffee. And for not slamming the door in my face. Madison, I called as she reached for the doorknob. Detective Kim from the Financial Crimes Unit will probably contact you. You should tell her everything you know. She paused, hand on the door. Will Brad go to jail? I don't know, I answered honestly. That's not my goal. What is your goal? I thought about it for a moment. Justice. Truth. Moving forward without his shadow over me. Madison nodded. I want that too. She opened the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for what happened yesterday, but for everything. After she left, I sat alone in my quiet apartment, turning over our conversation in my mind. Of all the scenarios I had imagined following the party disaster, Madison arriving at my door seeking understanding hadn't been among them. My phone buzzed again. Patricia this time. I answered, still distracted by Madison's visit. You'll never believe who was just here, I began. Save it, Patricia interrupted. You need to come to my office right now. Brad's attorney called. They're contesting the divorce agreement. What? Why? He's the one who wanted the divorce. Apparently, now that the house situation is public, he's claiming you concealed assets and information. He's trying to spin this as you manipulating him. I laughed incredulously. That's absurd. It's desperate, Patricia agreed. But it means this isn't over, Harper. He's fighting back. An hour later, I sat in Patricia's office reviewing the new legal filings. Brad's attorney, a shark named James Thornton, known for scorched earth divorce tactics, was claiming I had deliberately misled Brad about our financial situation, had hidden information about the LLC structure, and had orchestrated the foreclosure timing to maximize his public humiliation. This is ridiculous, I said, pushing the papers away. He's the one who forged my signature on loan documents. He's panicking, Patricia said calmly. The financial investigation is gathering momentum. His perfect exit strategy has imploded. He's lashing out. What do we do? We fight back. With truth, with documentation, with the paper trail you've meticulously maintained. She smiled grimly. Your grandmother taught you well. As we strategized our response, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Laura Kim. We need to talk. Something's come up in the investigation. Can you meet tomorrow morning? I showed Patricia the message. What do you think something means? With financial investigations? Could be anything from a smoking gun to a minor discrepancy. Patricia checked her calendar. I'll come with you. 9 a.m. works for me. That evening, alone again in my temporary home, I found myself doing something I hadn't done since Brad's. Betrayal. I cried. Not the broken sobs of a woman destroyed, but the cleansing tears of someone finally processing grief. I cried for the 8 years spent with a man who could discard me so easily. I cried for the home I'd loved and lost. I cried for Madison, who had stumbled into a trap set by the same man who had once charmed me. I even cried for Brad, whose desperate scrambling couldn't fix what he'd broken. When the tears finally stopped, I felt lighter somehow. I made myself a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by my window watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Detective Kim's mysterious discovery, Brad's legal counterattack, the continuing unraveling of my former life. But tonight, in this small apartment, with my grandmother's clock keeping steady time, I found a moment of peace. The worst had happened. I had survived. And in surviving, I had discovered something unexpected. Strength I never knew I possessed. Detective Laura Kim's office felt different this time. Less intimidating, more like a space where truth could finally emerge. Patricia sat beside me, tablet ready, her professional armor fully deployed. Across the desk, Detective Kim arranged several folders with methodical precision. Thank you for coming, Ms. Caldwell, she said, her expression unreadable. And Ms. Peterson. Good to see you again. You mentioned a development in the investigation, I prompted, anxiety knotting my stomach. Laura nodded. Several, actually. She opened the top folder. First, our forensic accountants have confirmed that your signatures were forged on at least 6 different loan documents. Patricia made a note. That's definitive evidence of fraud. Yes. Laura turned to me. However, that's not why I called you in today. She pulled a document from another folder and slid it across the desk. I leaned forward to examine it. A bank statement from an account I'd never seen before. What am I looking at? I asked. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands, opened 3 years ago under the name Whitaker Investments, LLC. Laura tapped the page. Do you recognize any of these transactions? I scanned the statement, eyes widening at the amounts. Regular deposits ranging from $5,000 to $25,000, withdrawals to unknown entities, a current balance of just over $650,000. No, I whispered. I've never seen this before. We didn't think so. Laura pulled out another document. This is what really interests us, the money trail. She placed a flowchart on the desk, a complex web of transactions showing how money had moved from our joint accounts, through various shell companies, and eventually into this offshore account. Brad was systematically diverting funds, Laura explained. Not just from your shared assets, but from his clients at the investment firm. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. He was stealing from clients? We believe so. The investigation has expanded beyond your personal situation, Ms. Caldwell. We're now looking at a pattern of financial misconduct spanning several years. Patricia leaned forward. How was this discovered? Ironically, through Mr. Whitaker's attempt to transfer the Caldwell Properties, LLC. Laura's expression softened slightly. When he tried to take control of the LLC without proper authorization, it triggered an automated alert in the banking system. That led us to dig deeper. I sat back, mind reeling. So all this time, while I thought he was just making poor financial decisions, he was deliberately hiding money, Laura finished. The foreclosure, the credit card debt, the loans, they were smokescreens designed to create financial chaos that would be difficult to untangle. And Madison? I asked. Was she involved? Laura shook her head. We've interviewed Ms. Rivers extensively. She appears to be another victim in this scenario. Mr. Whitaker was living beyond his means to impress her, using money that wasn't his. The room fell silent as I processed this information. Brad hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He'd been systematically betraying me, and others, financially for years. The magnitude of his deception was staggering. What happens now? I finally asked. Mr. Whitaker was taken into custody this morning, Laura said quietly. He's facing multiple charges, including fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Taken into custody, I repeated, the words feeling surreal. You mean he's in jail? Laura nodded. He's being processed now. His attorney is already working on bail arrangements, but given the flight risk and the offshore accounts, the prosecutor will likely request a significant amount. I turned to Patricia, whose expression revealed she was as shocked as I was. Did you know about this? Not the extent of it, she admitted. I suspected financial impropriety, but not embezzlement from clients. Laura closed her folders. There's one more thing you should know, Ms. Caldwell. Because the house was purchased through the LLC, and because we can prove Mr. Whitaker's attempts to transfer ownership were fraudulent, the property itself is not subject to immediate foreclosure. The bank has agreed to pause proceedings pending resolution of the criminal case. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means, Patricia interjected, understanding dawning on her face, that you might be able to keep the house, Harper. If we can prove the loans were taken fraudulently, without your knowledge or consent, you may be able to restructure the debt. Hope flickered briefly before reality extinguished it. I don't want the house anymore, I said firmly. Too many memories, too much pain. Laura nodded understandingly. That's your choice. But legally, you have options now that we've uncovered the full scope of Mr. Whitaker's activities. As we left the police station, the bright midday sun seemed too cheerful for the gravity of what I'd just learned. Patricia linked her arm through mine, guiding me toward a bench in the small park across the street. Sit, she commanded gently. You need a moment. I obeyed, suddenly exhausted. He's going to jail, Patty. Probably, yes. The evidence seems overwhelming. I never wanted that, I said quietly. I just wanted the truth. Sometimes the truth has consequences we don't anticipate. Patricia squeezed my hand. This isn't your fault, Harper. I know, but I can't help feeling like I should have seen it sooner. Maybe if I had... Don't. Her voice was firm. Don't take responsibility for his choices. We sat in silence, watching people pass by. Strangers with unknown stories, carrying their own invisible burdens. What will you do now? Patricia finally asked. I considered the question, feeling the weight of possibility. For weeks, I'd been focused on surviving, on exposing Brad's betrayal. I hadn't allowed myself to think beyond that immediate goal. I don't know, I admitted. Start over, I suppose. Patricia nodded. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Madison again. Just heard about Brad. Detective Kim told me they took him. In. Are you okay? This is so much bigger than I imagined. I stared at the message, surprised by her concern, by this strange bond forming between two women who should, by conventional logic, be enemies. I'm processing. I typed back. You? Her response came quickly. Same. Feel like I've woken up in someone else's life? Would you want to grab coffee sometime? I think we both need to talk to someone who understands. I showed the message to Patricia, who raised an eyebrow. Coffee with the other woman? That's unexpected. This whole situation is unexpected, I replied, typing a quick agreement to Madison before putting my phone away. As we walked back to Patricia's car, a strange lightness began to replace the shock. Brad was facing consequences for his actions. The truth, the whole truth, was finally emerging, and I was still standing stronger than before. You know, Patricia said as we drove away from the police station, your grandmother would be proud of you. For sending my ex-husband to jail? For standing your ground? For following the evidence? For not letting someone else's betrayal define you? I smiled at that, picturing Grandma Rose's approving nod. She always said justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. Wise woman, Patricia said. Now let's talk about your future. The real estate firm in Tarrytown is still looking for an experienced attorney. I could put in a call. As Patricia outlined possibilities, I gazed out the window, watching Westchester County slide past, the place where my life had imploded now becoming just another landscape in my journey. For the first time since Brad had shoved those divorce papers across our kitchen island, I felt something like hope unfurling in my chest. Not the desperate hope of someone clinging to the past, but the quiet anticipation of someone ready to step into whatever came next. 6 months after Brad's arrest, I stood in the garden of my new home in Tarrytown, coffee mug in hand, watching the Hudson River flow quietly beyond my backyard. The modest Cape Cod-style house wasn't as grand as the Westchester home I'd shared with Brad, but it was mine, paid for with the settlement from Brad's frozen assets and my new position at Riverdale Law Partners. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dewy grass as I settled into the Adirondack chair Patricia had given me as a housewarming gift. My grandmother's clock ticked steadily inside, audible through the open kitchen window, a reminder that time continued its forward march, healing wounds and creating new possibilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Heading to court now. Nervous about testifying. Any advice? I smiled, still amazed by the unlikely friendship that had formed between us. Madison had emerged from Brad's shadow with a determination that impressed me, returning to school to finish her business degree, providing crucial testimony against Brad, gradually rebuilding her life with a humility and grace I hadn't expected. Just tell the truth, I typed back. That's all anyone can ask of you. Dinner after? Definitely. I'll need a drink. As I set my phone down, a car pulled into my driveway. Detective Laura. Kim stepping out in civilian clothes, carrying a file folder and what looked like freshly baked muffins. Hope I'm not too early, she called, making her way to the garden gate. Perfect timing, I replied, gesturing toward the empty chair beside me. Coffee's fresh. Laura had become another unexpected ally, her professional interest in Brad's case evolving into a genuine connection that transcended her official duties. Now that the main investigation was complete and the case was proceeding to trial, we'd developed a friendship based on mutual respect. Blueberry muffins, she said, setting the paper bag on the small table between us. My grandmother's recipe. Grandmothers and their wisdom, I said, pouring her coffee. Where would we be without them? Laura settled into the chair with a contented sigh. I have updates, she said, opening the folder. The prosecutor has reached a preliminary plea agreement with Brad's attorneys. I tensed slightly. What kind of agreement? 5 years minimum, with financial restitution to all affected clients. Full confession, no trial. She watched my reaction carefully. Are you okay with that? I considered the question, watching a heron glide gracefully across the river. Yes, I said finally. A trial would just prolong everything. I'm ready for this chapter to close. There's more. Laura pulled out a document. The Westchester house has been cleared for sale. Once the restitution to Brad's clients is paid, you'll receive the remaining proceeds as the legitimate owner of Caldwell Properties, LLC. That's unexpected. Good news. You deserve it, Laura said simply. Your documentation made this case possible. Without your meticulous records, Brad might have continued his scheme for years. I shook my head. I was just following my grandmother's advice. Well, your grandmother saved a lot of people from financial ruin. Laura sipped her coffee, including Madison Rivers. She's testifying today, I said. About what she knew? Or rather, didn't know. She's been cooperative throughout. Quite resilient, considering. We have that in common, I admitted. Resilience in the face of Brad Whitaker's destruction. We sat in comfortable silence, watching birds dart among the trees that lined my property. After a while, Laura set down her cup. I've been meaning to ask you something, she said. The private investigator firm I moonlight with is expanding their financial forensics division. Given your background in real estate law and your first-hand experience with financial fraud, would you consider consulting for us occasionally? I blinked in surprise. You want me to help investigate cases like mine? Exactly. Laura nodded. Your perspective would be invaluable. And from what I've seen, you have a natural talent for following paper trails. I'll think about it, I promised, genuinely intrigued by the possibility. After Laura left for work, I spent the morning in my home office, reviewing cases for my new position at Riverdale Law. Around noon, Patricia called. Have you seen the news? She asked without preamble. No, I've been working. What happened? Brad's pleading. Guilty. It's official. Press conference just ended. I moved to my laptop, pulling up a local news site. There it was. Brad's face, haggard and gray, standing beside his attorney as they announced his intention to accept responsibility for his actions. How do you feel? Patricia asked softly. I studied the image of the man I'd once loved, now a stranger in every way that mattered. Relieved, I answered honestly, and sad for the person I thought he was. Understandable. Listen, are we still on for dinner tomorrow? I have news about the community legal clinic proposal. Absolutely. 7 o'clock? After ending the call, I walked through my house, trailing my fingers along walls I'd painted myself, past furniture I'd chosen for comfort rather than status. Each room represented a decision made solely by me. For me, a physical manifestation of my reclaimed autonomy. In the late afternoon, I drove to the courthouse to meet Madison. She was sitting on the steps, sunglasses hiding her eyes, blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she saw me, she stood and waved. "How did it go?" I asked, embracing her briefly. "Easier than I expected," she admitted as we walked toward my car. The prosecutors were kind. I just told them what I knew, which wasn't much, honestly. I feel so stupid looking back. "Don't," I said firmly. Brad was skilled at deception. He fooled his clients, his colleagues, and me, for years. Over dinner at a quiet riverfront restaurant, Madison detailed her testimony and her plans to graduate at the end of the semester. "I've been offered an internship with a marketing firm in the city," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "Small company, but growing. Real work, not just coffee runs." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "You deserve a fresh start." Madison set down her fork, studying me across the table. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, curious. "Are you dating anyone?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I admitted. "Not ready for that yet." "When do you think you will be?" I considered the question. "When meeting someone new doesn't feel like a risk assessment," I said finally. "When I can trust my judgment again." Madison nodded, understanding. "I went on a date last week. First one since everything. I interrogated the poor guy like I was auditioning him for a security clearance. We both laughed, the shared experience creating a bridge neither of us could have imagined 6 months ago. "We'll get there," I said, raising my glass. "To healing at our own pace. And to keeping better records," Madison added with a wry smile. Later that night, back in my riverside home, I sat on my porch watching stars appear above the Hudson. My grandmother's clock chimed 9 times, its familiar sound carrying through the open window. I thought about the journey of the past year, from the moment Brad had given me 48 hours to disappear to this quiet evening in a home truly my own. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but each step had led me here, to this moment of hard-won peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Just confirmed. The Community Legal Clinic for Women. Facing financial abuse is approved. Board wants you to head it up if you're interested. No pressure, but your experience would be invaluable." I smiled, typing back, "Count me in." Every woman deserves to know her worth, and how to protect it. As I set my phone down, I remembered the day Brad had shoved those divorce papers across our kitchen island, his smug certainty that he was ending my story. In reality, he had merely ended a chapter. The pages that followed, painful though they were, had revealed strength I never knew I possessed, connections I couldn't have anticipated, and possibilities I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Madison's scream that day at the housewarming party had been a turning point for all of us, the moment when fiction collapsed and truth emerged. Her panic, Brad's crumbling pride, my quiet vindication, all pieces of a complex puzzle that had finally taken shape. I walked inside, stopping before my grandmother's clock. Its steady rhythm had guided me through the darkest moments, a reminder that time doesn't stop for our tragedies or triumphs. It simply continues, offering new moments, new chances, new beginnings. Running my fingers across its polished wood, I remembered what my grandmother told me when I asked why she wound it every evening without fail. "Time is the only truly fair judge, Harper," she'd said. "It reveals what words conceal, heals what seems permanently broken, and eventually leads every story to its proper conclusion." Standing in my new home, surrounded by choices that were entirely my own, I finally understood what she meant. Brad had given me 48 hours to disappear from his life. In doing so, he had given me the unexpected gift of rediscovering my own. You can lose a marriage, you can lose a house, but if you never lose yourself, you've already won.